Now we get to question and answer. So if any of you would like to stay, of course you could do that. Of course, of course, of course. Well, I got lots of questions to catch up on over here. Okay. What should I do? Should I just start going through all the questions, or should we do live questions? What would you rather?
Go through the questions first, and then I can't get my chat to work for me, but I have a
All right.
question.
All right. All right. Let's do this. Okay. All right, friends, buckle up. Here we go. Andy Nitzkin. How are you, Andy? If the soul enables emotions, why are there so many people with emotional difficulties and pain? Yes, the soul enables emotions. At the same time, the soul also enables the emotions of the body. And it kind of becomes a dual identity. We're not really getting too much into it in this course, but Andy, if you remember last year by the Warrior to Warrior course, which you joined, we spoke about that really we have two souls. There's something called the godly soul, and then there's something called the natural soul or the animalistic soul. And that's kind of the soul of the body. The body also has a little bit of a personality and its own drive. So the soul, the godly soul, the godly essence of who we are, which is what we're talking about in this course, also gives life to the emotions and the drives and the impulses of the body. And that's where you have negative emotions come into a person. But that dies. Those negative emotions die with the body because they're associated to the body. But the holy and the pure and the good emotions, which is more comes from the soul, that continues after death. All right, I hope that answers your question. See, this is great. I can answer questions without feeling that pressure, because I don't want to keep you here till 10 p.m. That wouldn't be nice. Okay, so we got to balance it out. Shelly, I want to get back to your question. Shelly, you're still on? Yeah. Hey, Shelly, how are you? Wonderful seeing you here. Is the neshama another level of the soul? The answer is yes and no. The neshama has two definitions. The neshama is the way we is a term used to talk about the soul as a whole, but neshama also, more specifically, is the name for the third dimension of the soul. Sherry, they say that you have to be 40 years old to study Kabbalah. Yeah, that's correct. Marshall, okay, yeah, but to Sherry, to your question, that doesn't mean that we can still study pieces of Kabbalah, but to become, to do in-depth study of Kabbalah, of raw Kabbalah, that's usually inappropriate without some background. So 40 years is definitely a good place to start, but you don't start with Kabbalah if you don't have a lot of background. Chassidus, the teachings of Chassidus is a very good blend of and a very good beginner's place to study Kabbalah. Raw Kabbalah, it really does not make sense for beginners to start learning. And if you need some proof, try opening up an actual piece of Kabbalah, not some Kabbalah book you buy on Amazon written in English. And by the way, I just want to warn all of you, there's a lot of pseudo Kabbalah out there. So if you ever want to read a Kabbalah book, just make sure you're not buying some fraud material, because it's just pretty unfortunate that exists. That some of the holiest and purest teachings that we have, there's all these fraud knockoffs on the internet. So it's pretty sad to see that. But in any case, if you actually try reading a raw piece of Kabbalah, the Zohar, the Pri Eitz Chaim, you won't begin to understand what's happening. It's just, unless you have a lot of background, it's incomprehensible. And I'm saying that myself as well. To study raw Kabbalah is extremely difficult and close to impossible. Okay, Francie's asking a really good question. And is it easier for the soul to leave the body of a person who performed many mitzvahs compared to those who don't? And I told you earlier that I don't know, but I'll just say that I don't think so. If a soul leaves the body and didn't do a lot of mitzvahs, it's definitely painful, because that means, time's out. But even if you did do a lot of mitzvahs, then you missed that. Then you were enjoying life. So either way, it's difficult. But I guess it's maybe a different pain. I guess it's a different feeling. Okay. Shelly, why do we bury our dead the same day if the soul hovers with the body for 3 to 7 days? The answer is the soul stays with the body even after burial. But burial is the dignified thing to do to the body. It's closure, and it helps the closure process begin. It's a very important thing for the soul and also for us. And the Torah says the real reason why the Torah says bury it that day is because it's undignified. A dead body, a corpse should not just be laying around. You bury it right away. Treat it with respect. Royanne asked at 8:08 p.m. what if someone is cremated? Okay, so I guess a few minutes later we spoke about that. Okay, Sherry. On page 46, it talks about how the degree of distress the soul experiences is mirrored by the difficulty of the mourning of loved ones. Does our grief make it harder for the soul of the departed, or is our grief somewhat reflective of the soul's struggle? It's the latter, it's reflective. And I don't think it makes it harder. I answered this briefly in class. When we mourn, we're mourning with the soul, and that's very comforting. It's a support, you know. The loved ones are supporting the soul, and it's in a difficult phase of life. So it's very special for the soul when people are there and show the soul that it's remembered, that it's cared for, that it's cherished, and that we're still with it. We're still supporting it. Okay, this is a great question. Who asked this? Marshall. Okay, this is a great question. Do the nefesh and ruach respond identically in the four phases? Where does the nefesh go when the ruach ascends to Gan Eden? Okay, so let me explain. The nefesh, the lowest dimension of the soul, always remains with the body. When we were talking about the four phases, I believe we were talking more about the other dimensions of the soul. But the nefesh always stays with the body and associates with the body, right? The part of the body that fueled the biological life always remains with the body, but the other, higher dimensions of the soul, I believe the four dimensions refer more to them. The four phases refer more to them. Okay, Dr. Lieber, there are mediums, i.e. people that can help you communicate with the souls of the people you love. Dr. Lieb, that's actually forbidden, according to Judaism. According to Judaism, it's we can't, let me put it this way, we can't force our ideal method of connection on souls. We like being, because we're physical, mortal human beings, or to put it more, corporeal human beings, we're physical. Therefore, we relate to physical connection. If you talk to me, okay, now we're connecting. If we're in the same room, okay, now we're in close proximity. But a soul, moves past that physical reality. So time and space and physical expressions of connection don't apply to the soul anymore. So don't force the soul to do that. That's not the way the souls communicate. And the way you communicate with a loved one is on their terms. And right now that soul lives a spiritual life. The more that we meet the soul on a spiritual level, the more we connect. So don't force the soul to talk to you, and don't force the soul to, and don't either expect it that way, right? We don't expect from 2-year-olds to connect with us like a 25-year-old. It's inappropriate, right? So again, just about having a healthy, the idea of mediums is just, I would say it's very not Jewish. Okay, Marshall, to why we don't follow that Jewish law, I explained, but it's not because some guy said it's not pragmatic, so let's not rip our clothing. It was, Jewish law has something called takanot, which means legislations, and Judaism, there's the Torah itself says that rabbis should legislate and make sure that the Torah is being followed the right way, and also deals with certain sensitivities. So we have a course called Judaism Decoded, which we're going to be running this summer. And we speak about the evolution of Jewish tradition. And so Marshall, stay tuned for that concept of a halacha not being practical anymore. We'll be speaking all about the science of Jewish law and Jewish tradition in that course. Okay. Gail, does the soul reunite with past loved ones? Absolutely. 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 Okay. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Yeah. And again, this course is stressing that souls don't become indifferent to their loved ones when they die. The soul goes up and that's it. It's gone. It's, even if it's alive, just minds its own business. It's removed from earth. This course shows us.
Excuse me. Part of my question was like, let's say when I die, do we get to see our parents or our cousin or whatever in their same form that they were when we knew them? Because I understand there's different
Well,
lives.
form is an interesting word to use. We don't see
Well,
them as bodies, we see them as souls. So we're
yeah.
a soul and we connect with them on that soul level. Yes, but absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Um, Sherry's asking, this is an interesting question. Are the members of the Chevra Kadisha, of the Holy Society, are they always a secret to the general Jewish community? No, they're not.
No, I know.
Not,
Yeah.
not at all. In the Crown Heights community, the Chabad community, it's public knowledge who's on the Chevra Kadisha. My grandfather was on the Chevra Kadisha. That was public knowledge. And
In
it's a big
Flint, it's a secret.
interesting.
We just
Could be so-
contact someone and then they call up the members and you have no idea.
Interesting. I want to look into that. That's very, it could be certain communities do that. That's very interesting. It's very interesting. Okay, Christy is asking, I don't mean to make light of any of this, but would a mushroom suit burial be okay since it's still a burial? Christy, are you
what?
still a mushroom suit burial? I am not familiar with this
Yeah.
term. If you're still here, Christy, I don't see her here. Okay, so we'll move on. I'm not familiar with every form of burial and mushroom suit burial. The idea is Judaism has a very, very specific way of burying, and it's the most natural way. It's the most organic way of doing it. So let me just put it this way: any shtick, don't do it. In Judaism, it's a very sacred thing, the way we bury a body. Okay, Anita is asking a very good question over here. I agree with burial versus cremation, but what is the difference between ash and dust in the long run? And wouldn't burying ash be the same as burying a body? So the answer is, I'll tell you two things. Number one, when a body decomposes naturally, that's natural. Cremation is anything but natural. It's very artificial. So there's a very big difference. One is dignified, one is natural, and one is very undignified. But more importantly, cremation is not just decomposition. Cremation is destruction. All right, let's say it as it is. Cremation is destroying the body. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever done any research into what's the process of cremation. When a body gets cremated, there are barely any ashes left. After cremation, there are no ash. So you know what they give the family? Ground up bones. They take the bones and they put it into a machine and they grind it into a fine dust. And that's what the family gets. You're not getting ash, you're getting crushed up bones. It's destroying the body. Let's say it as it is. It's destroying the body. There's a very fundamental difference. One is dignified and one's just an act of destruction. That's not the way to treat a body. So in the long run, that's the difference. Another thing is that there's a very interesting concept. There's one bone that never decomposes. It's called, in Hebrew, it's called the etzem luz. The etzem luz, I believe it's a bone at the upper part of the neck. And even if everything decomposes, that bone never decomposes. And according to Jewish tradition, at the resurrection of the dead, the body is going to kind of, regrow or, come back to life from that intact bone. So one is natural, one is not destruction, and the other one is artificial and destruction.
So wait, so in cremation, will those bodies come back because of the loose bone?
Those souls come back, but it's a big question if they're going to come back in the same body.
Okay, because I have that concern with Holocaust
Right.
victims.
So Holocaust victims, let's be very, very clear. Part of the real problem with cremation is the choice. A lot of the problem is the choice of doing it. Sometimes the intention is a bigger problem than the actual act. So as horrible as the act is, the intention sometimes is what's worse. So when a Jew chooses to cremate, now I also want to say, if a Jew is not aware, right? In Judaism, somebody is never held accountable for ignorance. If you don't know, you're not held accountable. So that's a very important idea, right? No judgment if somebody made a mistake and just didn't know and cremated a loved one. But if somebody does it on purpose, that's a very negative thing. Now, the point is, those who are killed in the Holocaust, which many of them were cremated, are the holiest souls around. They're the holy of holies. And there's no question that they're going to be resurrected when Mashiach comes. And there's no question they're going to be the first ones. They're going to be at the front lines, the first to return soul in a body when Mashiach comes. Elaine is asking, 1 second, Howard. I wanna focus on that. Or maybe I'll get, maybe I'll switch off. What about plane crashes or death in the sea? At a certain point, if it's not practical to get back the body, then it's, then that's the situation. Okay, Barb Sugarman was saying practically speaking. Barb, are you still here? Okay, no. Practically speaking, cremation is much less expensive, and some people simply can't afford a burial. So I addressed that. There are so many resources, and God forbid for a body to have to be cremated because of financial problems. And again, a Jewish funeral home or any Jewish organization will really help out with that. Marshall's, is there a Jewish prohibition of I'm sorry, Marshall, can you help me out over here?
Cryopreservation, it's sort of a new age thing of freezing or preserving a body till medical science might be able to bring you back. It's not a practical thing, but people are actually doing it. Is there a Jewish opinion on this?
Yeah, the Jewish opinion is burial is the only way of doing it. It's life's over, return it to God. Daniel's asking, could cremation be a way to live out one's respect for the earth, use of land? So Daniel, I don't know if you're still on over here. Okay, this is another interesting reason why some people choose cremation, because land is for the living. Why should dead people take up land? So I want to give you a statistic I saw. Number one, a statistic, and then number one, an insight. Number one is, in 10,000 years, this is an accurate number. In 10,000 years, if America buries all of its dead, it'll take 10,000 years for us to reach up that dead people take up 1% of inhabitable land of America. We have so much space. That's number one. If you're worried about that we're going to run out of land, it's really not a practical thing, But number two, dead bodies are worth the earth's space. Yeah. It's worth that there should be a permanent memory, a permanent space on earth that is marked, dedicated to this person. Yeah, it's absolutely worth that space. Anita says, so what does this say for those burned to death to the point of ash if they had no choice? Does God repudiate those people? Or is there some reason that God chooses to dispose of those people in this way? So God forbid, God does not repudiate those people. Those people are the holiest of people. If a Nazi burns a Jewish body, that's not a choice. And the opposite, they go, somebody who is killed as a Jew passes all the layers of judgment, goes straight to Gan Eden, goes straight to paradise. They're considered the holiest souls. A Jew who dies in the hands of, yes. Okay, let me get now some questions over here. I'm still in the middle over here. Okay, Howard, you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing though. I think you addressed my the rising of the dead. So people will come back. I mean, I know that people sometimes don't want to give organs because they will go for research as opposed to helping a human life, and that you want to have those organs available to you, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised you didn't say though that cremation as one of the sort of negatives was, if someone doesn't believe in all the other things, boy, that's what the Nazis did to us. It's like, so you're going to treat a loved one like, what the Nazis did, which is basically, burn them up. So, I don't know if you had thought about that. I mean, it was sort of mentioned at one point, but whatever. I'm actually curious about crypts. You know, like I remember when I was very young in Italy, going to Italy, and there was some Jewish crypts, and they weren't buried in the earth. I mean, they were underground, but there was a like some type of wall, and then alongside of that, these cement sort of containers that they put around all people who are buried now, even if you're buried in a wood casket, seems very problematic, I guess.
Okay, so let's get one question at a time. So your first,
Sorry, the crypts first.
Crypts first case. Let's get to, so crypts. I'm not sure about. I got to look into that. But I will tell you. So yeah, you're saying actually a good point that today, and certain states have this as law that when you bury somebody, you need to put cement supports, and this is for the support of the ground, for the water table. And I actually spoke to somebody who dealt with this here in Michigan, what the laws are. What they do, what Jewish funeral homes or what Jewish cemeteries do here, is they do create like a cement box, which they put the casket into. And she told me, this woman who I spoke to, that for religious Jews, what they do is they don't make a box with a bottom, they just do 4 walls. But the casket goes straight on the ground, and that is the ideal way to do it.
So I mean, I've seen people put dirt within the concrete space.
Right, but even so, it has to be able to touch the actual earth of the ground. The body should have contact with the earth of the ground. So that's the ideal way to do it. The ideal way is to not have concrete slab under. It's meant to reintegrate back into the earth of the ground.
Okay.
Okay. Now the Nazi thing, I didn't, of course I thought about that, right? Look at how Nazis treated Jews, and then you know how not to treat a Jew, right? So that's a pretty good, easy indicator if you're not sure what to do. I didn't want to say that because it's a sensitive topic. People have made the choice of cremation. And on the one hand, I want to say the truth. I don't want to necessarily sugarcoat it, but that's an idea that could come across as a little bit hurtful. And it's doesn't add substance to the argument. It's pretty self-evident, right? Anybody who thinks about it, as you said, it's pretty self-evident. You think about it, this is the way the Nazis treated us. This is the way Nazis disposed of our bodies. So they kind of.
Okay. And again, with regards to the cremation thing, they really don't know what's going to happen with those Jewish bodies in terms of what will happen in the rising of the dead type of thing.
They're for sure going to come back. The question is, and we don't really know these things, are they going to come back in the original body that they lived with? Is it going to be a new body? In general, we don't have, by the way, our next course is about Mashiach, is about the Messianic era, our spring course about the future. What's the future according to Judaism? So we'll be talking, and also lesson 6, we'll be talking more about the resurrection of the dead. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Gail, go ahead.
If a Jew has been cremated, will they come back since it's forbidden?
They will still come back, but if they made the choice to cremate, not necessarily in their original body.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not necessarily in the original body if it was destroyed, but possibly. Yes, it's hard to know, but they will come back. They will come back. Okay, let's continue here. Can God reassemble the cremains as well as assemble the decomposed body? Daniel's asking, and again, I said it's not, I don't have clarity from a Jewish perspective if cremated souls will be coming back into their body that they lived with while they were living here. But there's definitely the fundamental difference of one is the natural decomposition and one is the destruction of the body. Okay, next question. Some Holocaust survivors, when they die, put the names of family members on their headstones in order for that person to still be remembered, even though there's no body of that loved one, due to the Holocaust correctuary. The Rebbe's wife did that. The Rebbe's wife's sister and brother-in-law. The Rebbe's sister-in-law and brother-in-law were killed in the Holocaust in Treblinka. And when the Rebbe's wife passed away, she put on her headstone for her sister, Shana. And actually, my daughter Shana is named after the Rebbitzin sister. Okay, next question here. But how long these days do family members actually go to the gravesite to honor their family members, especially as they move around the country increasingly? That's a good question. Certain families are not going to be visiting their loved ones. Okay, that's irrelevant. You know, burial is still important. Nobody visits Moses, by the way. We don't know where Moses is buried, and that's deliberate. God did not want us to know where Moses was buried, like that it doesn't become a shrine, and that we start, making Moses into an idol. But God buried him. You bury somebody regardless if somebody's going to come visit, and let's just equal the playing field. As I told you earlier, the cremation remains don't either usually stick around for too long. So at least with burial, there's a permanent place where that person is always there, and that's their place on earth where they're eternally remembered and present.
I think that was, I'm guessing that was posted, that question was posed after we read the selection that talked about the importance of continue, to go to the grave, to, be respectful of your loved one. Not in the discussion about cremating versus burying.
Got it. Right. Okay, so if you can't do it, then you can't do it. But I know that there are certain people that make sure to take trips to visit their loved ones.
But can we not, if it's important to continue to love the deceased and think about them and sort of talk to them, isn't one of the beauties of Judaism that we don't need a middleman, that we can be in our kitchen making dinner and we can be communicating with somebody who's
Right.
gone.
We can still connect. Right. 100%. We can still connect with our loved ones, even if we don't go to their grave, but there's a uniqueness to go to where they physically are. There's a significance to that. But it doesn't, as you said, Francie, it doesn't negate the idea that we can continue connecting and giving nachas to our parents and our loved ones, and making them proud, without going to the grave. My grandfather makes an annual trip to Israel to visit his parents. When I was a rabbinical student, when I was 19 years old, I went to Odessa, Ukraine for 2 weeks. My great-great-grandfather was the chief rabbi of Odessa in the early 1900s, and then he was killed by the Nazis. So I made sure to visit his grave. So he got a visit from his great-great-grandson, and there's no question that that gave him nachas, a connection with his, okay. Next question here. Leia's saying, I've heard people say that their parent wanted to be cremated, so they had it done out of respect for honoring the parents' wishes. Right, Leia? I think we addressed that. It could be you asked this question before we addressed it.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, very
And then
good.
I just wanted to say about Hebrew
Sure.
Memorial,
Mhm.
they do have a green burial section.
Okay, that's interesting. I want to
It
look
is.
into that's interesting.
Yeah, and it was very interesting when they were, describing what it's like. They have wildflowers, perennials, that are there all the time, natural flowers. And then as far as the headstone, it's not a carved, stone. It's a natural stone that they use.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, so they do
Okay.
have one.
What happens when we run out of land? Anita's asking. So as I told you, that's not really a practical question. And you know what? That's God's problem. It's not our problem to deal with. If God wants us to bury, then we bury. We have problems. We're going to run out of land. All right, leave that to God. Daniel is writing over here, many municipalities do not allow green burials due to public health concerns, especially if there's a toxin which causes death. Yes, that's correct. You got to make sure to follow state laws, and every single state, the local funeral homes help you navigate how to make sure that you're doing a burial, which is according to Jewish law, in the most dignified way, and of course, always still keeping to state law. Okay, Leah Joseph is asking, I thought you said in a previous class that it was not good to visit a gravesite too often as it can be upsetting to the soul. Was that only in the first 12 months? Yes, that's in the first 12 months. I don't know if we spoke, I'm trying to think when we spoke about that, Leah. Maybe in the Jewish Course of Why, was that when we spoke about it? There's a concept, the first 12 months, we'll be talking about this in lesson 4. In lesson 4, we'll be talking about the first 11 months of the soul's life is still transitional. So we could go. So we should, we should give the soul a little bit of space, a little bit that first year, while it's in a little bit of a difficult. It didn't come to peace yet. So there's a Jewish idea to not visit the graveside, and for sure not to ask requests. To be a little bit sensitive to not to burden the soul. Okay, then we got a lot of thank yous here. Oh, okay, interesting. Alan, good question. Your comments seem to indicate that it is important to hold Shiva at the home of the deceased. Can you comment more on this? And the answer is yes. It's recommended. It's optional, but it's not obligated to do the Shiva at the home. But there is the bonus of doing a Shiva at the home of the deceased.
Coming up.
But if it's not practical, then you don't do it. Sometimes it's not practical, and that's fine. Ultimately, Shiva is mostly for the mourners. But you can't forget, right, but there's also the element of it being there for the soul. Marshall, beautiful. Thank you for bringing this up. There's an essay at the end, She is Pure, which is a very moving description of the author's Tahara experience. I very much suggest you to read that. A very, very beautiful, very moving. It's a very moving description of the process of caring for the body, caring for the corpse. Leah Joseph, great question. What about donation of organs?
Yes, that's
Okay, organ donations is a topic that deserves not one, not two, but probably 3 proper hour-and-a-half classes. There are lots of variables. It's not so simple. Organ donation, the question is for what? The question is which organ? The question is when. Under certain conditions, it is allowed. Under certain conditions, it's prohibited. A lot of the organ harvesting, not all, but a lot of organ harvesting happens when a person is brain dead. According to Jewish law, if you take out a heart from a brain dead person, they're still alive. That's based. You're terminating their life. So medically, they say the person's brain dead. So let's take out a heart. We can save somebody with this heart. But in Jewish law, you can't do that. You can't end a life. But every situation is unique, and it's complex. So you have to speak to a rabbi who's competent in this area of Jewish law, and it's under certain conditions, yes, it is allowed. But same thing with autopsies. You have to be very careful. We're talking about the dignity of the body, and most uniquely in Judaism, when the body is not conscious, that's when you need to be most careful, because the body has no power. So we have to be very careful. The dignity of the body, to treat a body respectfully after death, is very important. And there are times and there are places, situations where organ donation is permitted. Sometimes it's even a mitzvah, but tread carefully. That's what I'll tell you in brief. Great question, Francie. If the belief is that after death our soul eventually returns to our body, is the body in better condition than during the previous life? Like, is the person physically ill? Great question. The answer is that by the resurrection of the dead, bodies will return exactly the way they were put into the ground. If somebody was buried with a broken leg, there's going to be the revival of the dead also with a broken leg. But then God says, and I'm going to come and cure them. So it's interesting. The resurrection of the dead happens exactly as you died. And then as a living person, you're going to experience the healing of God to bring you to your full strength.
So you won't have dementia anymore if you had dementia when you die. Interesting. That's why.
I guess you will, but very temporarily, right? You come back and then you experience God giving you the gift of full health again. Okay, in Morocco, the Jews were buried under cement in the Jewish cemeteries. I have pictures if you would like to see them. I would like to see them. Under cement is not so problematic, as long as the bottom of the body is in direct contact with the earth's earth.
correct.
That's what's important. The bottom of the body has to be laying on the organic, natural earth of the ground. Leah, what is the Chabad view on purchasing a burial plot in advance of needing it? That's a good thing to do. In general, preparing for death is definitely a Jewish thing, and you do that. Yeah. Okay, lots of thank yous here. Ooh, Leah, why do some people leave stones when they visit a grave? It's interesting, Leah. It's not very clear. We don't really fully know the answer why we leave stones. But it's definitely a Jewish value that we don't leave flowers. We don't leave flowers because we want to, the soul doesn't care about flowers anymore. We want to show the stone that we're connecting on a deeper level. So, leaving flowers is not what the soul is looking for. That's not the gifts the soul is looking for. And a stone, I've seen it written that the purpose of the stone is more to show others that this soul is remembered. That's a very comforting thing for the soul as well. The knowledge, another stone, somebody remembered me. My presence is remembered. My memory is alive. Okay.
Next one's a personal one for her.
Yes.
More personal question. Would it be good
Would it be a good idea for me
to ask for?
Leah, if it's possible to do that, that would be a very good idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's her family.
Okay.
And on a more personal.
All right, we're done the questions on the chat. Any more questions? Okay, we got another question here. Marshall, you're gonna keep me up till 3 a.m. You're good. If a person dies and is buried in another state or part of the country, is it permissible to relocate the grave to a place where it could be visited when the whole family now resides? Okay, moving the grave is at times permissible, but again, tread with extreme caution. And again, the idea is moving a grave is very uncomfortable for the body, very uncomfortable for the soul. And again, talking about the dignity of the body, we want to make sure that we do it. We want to make sure it's necessary. We want to make sure it's done right. And again, case by case basis, speak with a competent rabbi who's familiar with these laws. And I know of cases where rabbis did permit it, that if there's a family plot and the whole family is being buried in one place, I know from previous experience that it was ruled that according to Jewish law, you're allowed to move the body, and even then, you have to do it very carefully with tremendous sensitivity to the body.
Rabbi,
Yes.
can we go back to the somebody? I can't remember who, but somebody asked about mediums, and
Yes.
you said you can't like impose your will. You can't like make that soul. That you have to meet with them on their terms, not on your terms. I mean, I'm very loosely paraphrasing what you said.
Yeah.
So, and I realize that, you have your perspective and I never believed in any of that stuff, like never, ever, until I felt my father's presence after he died, which is not in conflict with what you were talking about.
Absolutely not in conflict.
But recently I did actually participate in a small group session with a medium, and so it's nobody made my husband Alav Shalom communicate with her so that she could communicate with me what he was. There was no way for her to know what she was communicating to me, like on her own. She doesn't know me. So it was very comforting, and I couldn't help but feel like it was my husband's wish to, through her, communicate things to me that he could no longer say to me directly.
Mhm.
But she also told us ahead of time, those of us who were in this little mini group, be talking to our departed person who we want to hear from. Let them know, I would really love to hear from you. I would really love to know, So is that incompatible? I mean, I'm going to believe what I believe anyway, but is the way I just explained it, to me, does not seem incompatible with what you said. I didn't force David to. It's like,
So-
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, I understand. So if you feel the presence of a loved one on your own, that's definitely not incompatible. And as we learned, the idea of a loved one coming in a dream or in some other fashion And Julie, I know you asked about this last week. It's definitely Jewish. You know, the idea that a loved one can come and find its, you know, unique way of expressing itself to a loved one down here is definitely something we find in Judaism. But the,
I
idea, well, but the idea of going to a medium is very problematic according to Jewish law. But if you would like, I can research more on that, Francie, and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Okay,
Francie,
so because okay, but yeah, well, yeah, Julie, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say to Francie that I've experienced the same thing. And there were things that were said to me within a group setting, also a small group, and things said to me that nobody would have known, that my dad was standing next to his friend Ed. Well, that was my dad's best friend who passed away prior to my dad. And again, like Francie said, it's information that no one would know. It's not written anywhere. So that gives us a feeling of comfort, and that our loved one is still with us, be it his soul, you know, their souls or whatever. But I understand where you're coming from, and I'm sure you can appreciate where we're coming from as well.
For sure.
That's a
And I'd like
person.
to also research this a little bit more. It's been a very long while, so God willing, maybe next week after the class we can.
Okay.
Get back.
Okay, one of them is a two-part question. What I'm curious about is, first of all, when there is a newborn, is that a brand new soul that's going into that newborn?
Told you no.
The other part of this is when somebody does pass, when the body passes and the soul is still remaining as part of that body, is that's the life of that soul forever? They stay with that person and that's it? Okay, and the other question I had for you, this is more of a Bubba my side thing. And this is about being at the cemetery. When you go to a funeral at the cemetery, and when the cemetery is over and you want to go visit another grave that's at that cemetery, people say you shouldn't do that. I think what they're saying is that you should devote your time to the deceased. Is that a Baba Maisa or not?
Okay. So as you're saying here, edition, right? Let's deal with the first question first,
Okay.
and the second question second. Your first two questions about brand new soul and does that soul remain with the body forever? These two questions are related to the question of reincarnation.
Okay.
You know, are souls ever reused? And I hate doing this. I see reincarnation as just such a hot topic and so many questions related to it, but we're gonna deal with it in depth in lesson 5.
Okay.
So I want to give it the proper treatment at the time. And it's intuitive. You know, each lesson is a progression. You know,
Yeah.
lesson 5 belongs at lesson 5 because, you know, we're going to be building up towards that point, God willing. To your second question about only visiting one grave at a time when you visit a cemetery, I have not heard of that. So is it, I can't say for sure there's no idea of that. I'll look into it. I'll look
Okay.
into it. Okay. But yeah. Okay, Nancy, go ahead.
I just want to wrap up by saying
Oh, yeah, go
how
ahead.
much I'm really enjoying this class, by the way. It's really been enlightening.
I'm so glad to hear. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So
Rabbi.
you say there's a little bit of the nephesh that stays with the body. So when the human body decomposes, what happens to that bit of nephesh that was hanging with the body?
So I'll tell you two things. Number one,
Still there.
according to Jewish law, there's one bone that never decomposes. Everything else eventually decomposes. There's one bone. It's called the etzem luz. I don't remember right now offhand exactly which. I believe it's the top of the spine. I believe it's like right there by the neck and the spine. That never disintegrates, and that represents the actual remains of the body. And Judaism teaches that when there's the resurrection of the dead, the body's going to reform from that etzem luz, from that one bone, which is like at the heart of the body. So the soul still stays there. But there's also something which the Kabbalah speaks about, which it's not a physical thing; it's a spiritual thing. There's something called the spirit of the bones. Even when the bones disintegrate, the spirit of the bones remain there. It's not a physical thing, but there's a spirit of the body that also stays there, and the soul is also is there with that spirit. I don't understand practically what this, these are Kabbalistic concepts. But the point is that even when there's decomposition, the soul still remains. Now, here's the thing: as the body decomposes, the soul also gradually leaves more and more. There's always a portion of the soul that remains in the grave.
Okay, thank
With
you.
the grave, you're also speaking to the soul. This
But
is
the soul yearn to get back up, like, this.
it's metaphysical, so it's very difficult. So first of all, you can't give it location, right? It's not spatial. Paradise is not somewhere. It's beyond space. It's everywhere. That makes it very difficult to relate to. Rather, when we say there's a portion of the soul, the nephesh, that remains with the body, it means most of the soul doesn't associate itself anymore on a strong level with the body. So, but the portion that is associated with the body informs the rest of the soul, what's happening, when relatives come to visit. So does the portion of the soul that is remaining in the grave want to go up? I don't know. By the way, I'll just tell you something interesting, that in Jewish tradition, people who live their lives, that their entire bodily life was fully in line with their body, their bodies don't decompose. And you should know that there have been times in Jewish history where this has been proven. There have been times when they had to move. Sometimes there was like a government thing. The government is making a highway, and too bad on you. We're going to be mowing down a cemetery. And if there's nothing to do about it, the Jewish community had to relocate it. And it's a very fascinating thing in Europe. They've really found that tzaddikim, their bodies and their caskets are still 100% intact, which is an unbelievable thing. If the body is fully in tune with the soul, then the body also doesn't die as much. It's unbelievable. It's a fascinating idea, but that's just an interesting little side point. Yes, Joey.
I know it's late, and I don't want to.
I'm fine as long as the class officially ended. Then there's no pressure.
I want to share, and you know me, and you've watched my transition since I lost Linda, blessed memory, 4 years ago, and I am more connected to her every minute of every day. I mean, everything we just learned today, I am living proof. So if anybody doesn't believe it, believe me, it's true. And my spirituality has gotten so much more intense because I know that I loved her soul, and I lived with her soul along with her body for 45 years. But now her soul is with me, with my kids, everywhere, all the time. So it's just a blessing to hear this and learn this and have it all be put out this way. So thank you. Yes. And also the thing about burying, 2 years ago, about my friend Howard, who right up until the day we died, he wanted to be cremated, and we convinced him to get buried, and that's what Shalom has helped. So it's just a thank you. Yep.
Ron, you wanted to ask something. I'm sorry. Ron, go ahead. You can unmute.
No, the question I was going to ask, I believe you've already touched on. I couldn't understand if the soul is supposed to come back at some time in the future to the body, but the body will have been pretty much, decomposed by that time. Where is the concept that the body is going to rise again or live again? And you touched upon this one bone that remains when everything else deteriorates, but I still don't understand the concept of what that really means. If the body has deteriorated, it's not going to come back again because it's been decomposed. So how do you rationalize the concept with what seems to be the physicality of that not being possible?
Yeah. The body does decompose, but to whatever degree, and I don't understand exactly how it's going to work, God willing, we'll witness it with our own eyes speedily. But the body regrows. We know from our own bodies, our body is always, I'll put it this way, physically speaking, we don't have the same body as even a year ago. All of our cells regenerated. We have new cells, old cells, get washed away. We don't have the same skin as a year ago. The skin that we right now have is not the same skin we had a year ago. So the body is capable of growing and kind of developing itself. So exactly how it's going to work when Mashiach comes, there's going to be the resurrection of the dead. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but there's this concept. The body is going to revive itself. I don't know what that's going to be, but that's what's going to happen. The body itself, will come back. And in fact, the Kabbalah tells us the body is going to come back in the exact same form as when it passed away. If somebody died with a broken leg, they're going to be resurrected with a broken leg. And then God's going to heal them. When Mashiach comes, they're going to be resurrected with a broken leg, but then God's going to heal them. But the body comes back exactly the way it was put in. So really, burial is not the end. It's just, where we're putting the body for now. But the soul is waiting to come back.
But one other question, if it can come back after it's decomposed from having been in the ground, why by the same token couldn't it come back after it's been cremated? It's still,
It could be.
It's gone down to nothing one way, it's gone down to nothing in another way. It's still gone down to nothing.
Right. It could be. It could still be. But at a certain point, according to Jewish law and also practically, burning, incineration is a way of destroying something. So even though there could be ash remains, it's considered destroyed. And just by the way, there are no ashes. There are no ashes after cremation.
What is it that they put in the container then if there's
The container is the ground up bones. After cremation, they take out the bones, they put it into a machine and grind it, and that's what's in the urn. There's no body in the urn. They literally take bones and grind them, but the body is totally burnt up.
I have a question.
But 1 second, to Ron, I'm sorry, I'm gonna
Okay.
get to with you, Elaine.
That's fine.
But Ron, to your question, souls who are cremated could still come back. The question is, will they be coming back in the original body that they lived with? I don't know. But there's no question it's an act of destruction. Cremation is destroying the body. We know that, something is destroyed if it's fully burnt. Yeah, there are some remains, but it is gone.
So then the 6 million, however many actually went into the crematorium, they're in a position where theoretically they should not be able to somehow come back again in any form because of what you just said.
Again, let me reiterate. Somebody who's cremated can still come back. The question is, will they be coming back with their body that they lived with? Or will they get, so to speak, a new body? Ideally, they should be getting the same body. Now, there is a fundamental difference. If somebody chooses to be cremated, or if an anti-Semite murders and burns the body. There's a very big difference. And Jewish, there are Jewish writings about this. And Jewish text is adamant that those who were killed and murdered and cremated in the Holocaust will be the first ones to come back when Mashiach comes, and they'll be coming back in their original bodies.
Okay, so there's an exception because of the circumstance.
Exactly. There's a difference when it's a conscious choice versus a forced act of murder that's done to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Elaine, yes.
Right, it's Phyllis.
Oh, sorry, Phyllis, I'm
I
sorry.
wish you would have talked about grave visitation on page 65.
Mhm.
It says our mystic traditions reveal that a grave site is a communication port that allows us to commune with the souls above.
Right.
When we go to the cemetery, I know we had a book we used to call it the cemetery book. My husband always recited these prayers, and then we would talk to my mother-in-law or whoever and tell them what was going on can they really hear us?
Yeah.
On their souls or something on some level?
Yeah, it's an
And
active.
can they in some way talk to us or give us a message?
No,
Can't
because
give us any messages.
so they could give messages. They could give, but it's definitely a lot more difficult. Because we are physical beings, we are capable of, our method of communication is through physical interactions, physical speech, physical touch, etc. It becomes a lot more difficult. It becomes more difficult, there's no question, to connect and feel that connection after death. It's more difficult, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. There is a phenomenon, which is rare, but as we see, Jewish texts speak about it, of souls who departed coming back to their loved ones in a dream. Jewish writing.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't happen regularly, but especially tzaddikim have that power of communicating with their followers, with Jewish people who they led, even after their death, and, in their own unique way.
So if I were to talk to my husband at home and I would go to the cemetery and talk to him, can he hear me or realize what I'm doing at home as well as at the cemetery or during services,
Ideally, you should be doing it at the grave, because that's where
Okay.
that's the physical location on earth where the soul of your husband is. But yes, but you can always connect. You can always connect. And it's not necessarily through speech, but it's through spiritual connection. Again, there's connection that's spiritual because the physical component is lost. But the spiritual component, which is why we celebrate the yard site, and we should put thought into the yard site. We should be thinking about our loved ones. We should be sharing about our loved ones with others. We should be doing spiritual acts, doing a mitzvah, saying Kaddish, doing something in their memory. It's so important Jews do something in their memory, because that's how we can do an act of kindness right now. That's how we can connect with them. And we can't connect anymore by going out with them. But if we do a mitzvah for them, then it becomes a mitzvah with them. We're connecting through a spiritual method. So the method changes, but the connection doesn't.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Going to the cemetery between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'm assuming the reason is because that's when the souls are closer to us, or
It's
what's
two
the reason
things.
for that?
It's a time of prayer. It's also a time of judgment. It's a time of blessings. So the new year, we want to pray at the graves of our loved ones, so like that they could pray for us, like we learned in the text. They beseech God on behalf of their loved ones. So it's not an empty act of just a memorial when we go to their grave, especially at special times by New Year's. It's really before Rosh Hashanah. You're supposed to go before Rosh Hashanah. If you didn't go before Rosh Hashanah, you can go till Yom Kippur, but ideally it's before Rosh Hashanah. Because it's a new year, we're going to be judged. It's a time for new blessings. So we ask them to pray for us. But it's also that the souls, even deceased souls, get judged on Rosh Hashanah. And their years get judged and planned, and they get blessings on the new year. So we also pray for them. So we go to their grave too. Yeah, it's an opportune time. Judaism gives us times which are opportune to further that connection with our loved ones.
Thanks.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, I had to, for some reason, my volume is not really good on this, so that's why I put on the second thing before. So I'm going to try a different device next time. So I have actually kind of a two thing. So when you come back from a funeral and you go in from the grave to the home, they say you need to wash off, you're washing and you're washing your hands. So if it's so blessed and spiritual and everything, why do you do that? And my second question is about saying Baruch Dayan HaEmet, and how does that relate to the soul?
Okay.
They're kind of different, but.
Yeah, that's okay. So to your first question, there is a concept that living people who come in contact with a dead person attains a certain spiritual impurity. which seems initially to fly in the face of what we've been speaking about. The body is holy. So why would there be spiritual impurity by coming in contact with a dead body? But without going into too much length, it's the opposite. First of all, a body itself is never impure. It impures others. But more importantly, and it's a very big topic. It's a very also mystical topic. You know, we really it deserves its own class. The concept of spiritual impurity. What makes something spiritually impure? Spiritual impurity is when there is a certain departure of holiness. When an animal dies, the animal does not become unholy, or sorry, it doesn't become ritually. It doesn't get an impure energy. Why? Because an animal was never too holy to begin with. So when it dies, the more holiness there is, when that holiness leaves, there becomes a vacuum, which becomes a spiritual place of potential spiritual impurity. So it's in fact a little bit the opposite. Because it was holy, therefore, it's a little bit confusing. It's the point is it's not a contradiction. The more you understand how spiritual impurity works, it actually emphasizes the point. So initially, I understand it seems like a contradiction, but actually it's the opposite. But there is a spiritual impurity when going to a cemetery, which is why you wash your hands afterwards. And in general, a corpse gives off spiritual impurity. It's called tumah. But that in no means is a contradiction to what we've been saying, that the body is sacred and holy and has to be treated that way.
And my second question was about saying Baruch Dayan Hamet.
Baruch Dayan Hamet is less for the soul and more it's a declaration of faith. Baruch Dayan Hamet means blessed is the true judge. And it's what we say right when we lose something, or somebody which is so meaningful, and there's gonna be such a hurt right now. But we say, we don't understand why God did this, but God is the true judge. He made the call, and it was the right call. If this person needs to die right now, the first thing to do is acceptance. It's very sad. We're going to mourn. We're going to grieve. But blessed is the true judge. God made the right call. If this is what he decided, we accept that. It's more blessing God. It's saying we accept. It's very painful, but we accept. All right.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. Very good question, Diane. Rabbi, would you please comment on the Jewish view of organ transplants? Meaning they do save lives, but also change the body of the deceased. Right, I told you, Diane, we'll be getting to it soon. So there's a question that usually comes up with the cremation conversation, right? What about organ transplants? So what I would say is, it's a bit of a minefield. You need to be very careful. Because on the one hand, organ donations, organ transplants could be extremely beneficial. But there's also the idea of compassion or the dignity of the body. And there's that balance. You need to do it very delicate. I know that there are many times where it would be permissible, many times it's prohibited. I'll give you an example. Many organ harvesting happens when the person is brain dead. So, for example, a heart transplant. Once the body dies, you can't use that heart anymore for a heart transplant. So they harvest that heart while the person is brain dead, but still breathing, still alive. The heart's still pumping. Now, in Jewish law, halachically, that's extremely problematic because you're terminating a life early. So, medical science could say, well, the person's dead anyways. They're brain dead. But Jewish law says, who are we to say which life is more worth living? You can't actively terminate a life. So that's very problematic. So the point is, I do know of situations where organ donations, organ transplants did happen when there was even a mitzvah where you could save somebody else's life. But I also know that's an extremely, it's an extremely sensitive subject. And I could give 3 hour-and-a-half classes just on this topic to go through the different variables, to go through the different components, the different values. right? There's always the balance of Jewish law, Jewish values. It always comes together. Everything's Jewish values. So my point is, it could be done if it's something which you actually really want to know about practically. I can put you in touch with a rabbi who's an expert in this field. And but I would tell you that just generally that it's a sensitive topic. It has to be dealt with case by case basis. David is asking, why is embalming prohibited? Embalming is embalming prohibited per se? I don't know if it's like a prohibition, but it's definitely not the way we do it. It's in Judaism, we deliberately do not embalm the body. And again, in Judaism, we're very into giving the body back intact, and it's in its most natural state back to God. In Judaism, there's also a certain significance to the decomposition. That's part of the process. And again, it's artificial. Embalming is artificial. Don't artificially try to change the natural process. The process of death, returning the body back to God, it's already in God's hands. This is not our place to start coming in and trying to manipulate the situation. So that's what we do. Your grandfather died in Yom Kippur. That's a very holy death. People who die in Yom Kippur are very, very special souls to die in such a holy day. Okay, Patty's asking, what about donating the body to science, to medical school? Okay, so it's very problematic because on the one hand, you're helping science. On the other hand, they cut your body up. That's a very undignified thing to do to a body. So I'll put it this way. The only way in Jewish law that you can violate the dignity of a human body is if there is an actual case of pikuach nefesh, acute life and death situation. So if your body getting desecrated will help somebody else's life live, then you desecrate your body. The priority is that somebody else's life should be extended. Right? Saving a life is the biggest mitzvah a person can do. So it's an essence of the biggest mitzvah a dead person can do for its soul is to donate its body to save somebody else's life. But medical science, which is not an acute life and death situation, it's just research, that not. Anka is asking, okay, which body does it come back to if it's a reincarnated soul? Lesson 5. Lesson 5, we'll be doing all the incarnation stuff. Lynn, can you please address suicide? I'm not sure exactly what you want me to address, Lynn. Or maybe if you want to share with me a little bit more.
More that my understanding is it's against Jewish law, and this is everything that you're sharing has explained why. Mm-hmm. So how do you help mourners?
Mourners mourn. The soul, I would say, also needs a lot of support. The soul obviously lived a difficult life if they committed suicide. So, of course, Jewish law says don't end your life. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a tremendous compassion for somebody who wants to end their life. We'll do everything in our power to try to encourage them and help them not to take their life. But it obviously means that this is a soul which needs a lot of support. So to the contrary, I would say that the family and that the soul should get even more compassion and more support.
So I remember my mother committed suicide, and I remember being at Hebrew Memorial, and am I correct? This was quite a long time ago, that she wasn't supposed to be buried at the cemetery, in Mount Clemens, but they allowed it to happen. I mean, is that correct, or am I not remembering?
It could be remembering properly. Jewish law, there's only one way, according to Jewish law, that your body won't be getting burial, and that is through cremation. It's a misconception, actually. People think if suicide, if tattoos, you won't get buried. I don't know why. It's a very prevalent misconception that according to Jewish law, a body with tattoos won't get buried. Not at all. Suicide, of course, you're going to be getting buried. But that said, each funeral home and each cemetery gets to make their own rules. So I do know certain funeral homes who decided that we don't want to have people here who died a certain way or who had tattoos. Yeah. And I don't know what their reasoning is. It's not Jewish law. Jewish law, the only way you're not getting a Jewish burial is through cremation. And the simple reason is, to put it bluntly, there's nothing really to bury. You know, the body is destroyed.
That answer really makes me feel so much better.
For sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, that's the end of the questions. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? All right then. Okay, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you all soon. Take care, guys. Sei gesund.